If you've got a marathon coming up or are thinking about doing one, then I have no doubt you're putting a lot of time and effort into your running training. And that's brilliant because it's so important. But how much time are you putting into the one thing that could absolutely make or break your marathon on the day? I'm talking about your nutrition or what you eat during your marathon. And this is super interesting because it can feel overwhelming. And many runners I've spoken to haven't had a proper marathon nutrition plan in place because of how confusing it can seem. And this has led to tummy problems, energy crashes, and an end result which was not what they were hoping for. But by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what you should eat, when and how much, so that you can race your marathon confidently without any tummy troubles and finish strong. And if you're new here, then hey, my name's James and I'm a registered sport and exercise nutritionist. I work with amateur and professional endurance athletes to help them train and race better, improve their recovery, and do all of this in a healthy fashion. The time you spend actually running and training for your marathon is clearly super important, and without enough of that, your marathon is never going to go as well as you'd like. But so many runners I've spoken to haven't had a proper nutrition plan for their marathon, and when I've analysed what they've consumed, they're well below target recommendations, and unfortunately, this can cause massive problems during their race. To start with, I want to quickly run through how your body uses fuel for energy because it will make the rest of the video make much more sense. When it comes to a marathon, you have two major sources of fuel for energy, and those are carbohydrates and fats. Now, regardless of what speed you run your marathon at, so whether you're hoping to go under 3 hours or you're expecting it to take 6 hours, you'll use a combination of the two for energy, but it's highly likely you'll use far more carbohydrates than fat. And this is because carbs are your body's preferred energy source during moderate to intense exercise, and a marathon falls into this category, even if it is much longer than, say, a half marathon. This means that the primary nutrition focus during your race should be carbohydrates. And the really interesting thing is that when it comes to carbohydrates, the average person only has about 2,500 calories worth stored in their body. In practical terms, you've only got enough calories from carbohydrates to take you through about 90 minutes of hard but steady exercise, although that is only if you've carb loaded properly beforehand, and I have created a specific video for you, which I'll link at the end of this one. So carbs should be the focus, but I know that many of you might be thinking, well, what about fat burning? Isn't that important during a marathon? Now, it absolutely is, but the amount of fat you already have stored is crazy high. The average person has over 50,000 calories worth of energy stored as fat, so you've actually got enough energy to run a marathon several times over, although I doubt you want to do that. So this, plus the fact that your carb stores are limited, means that your nutrition focus has to be carbs, and that's why I'll be talking about carbohydrates in the upcoming sections. Running out of carbs during your marathon is really unpleasant, and it's the main reason for crashing energy levels and feeling truly awful, otherwise known as bonking, and I want to help you avoid that. Now, the final thing to say to round out this section is that if you want to run your marathon as well as possible, carbohydrates are the optimal fuel source. So please don't go low carb or follow a ketogenic diet unless you have a specific reason to do so and have worked with a registered professional. The next thing to talk about is how much you should actually eat during a marathon, and I want to keep this simple for you. If you're new to running nutrition, I might say some terms which seem a bit confusing at first, but stick with me, I'll walk you through it and I promise it will make sense. When I talk about carbohydrate intake during a marathon, I talk about it in grams of carbohydrates per hour. And this simply means how many grams of carbohydrates you should consume per hour, and I'll show you how you can work this out for yourself. But the basic recommendation that I give to any runner is to consume at least 50 grams of carbohydrates per hour, up to 80 grams of carbohydrates per hour when running a marathon. If you are hitting at least 50 grams of carbs per hour, then you're putting yourself in a really strong spot and you're going to be fueling your marathon well, especially if you've carb loaded properly and had a good breakfast. Now, in order to find out how many grams of carbs per hour you're consuming, you need to look at the packet of whatever it is that you're planning on using during your race. And on that packet, it should give you the total carbohydrate amount, and this is what you're after. So then you just work out how many of those you need to consume to reach that minimum of 50 grams of carbs per hour threshold. So let's say you want to use Morton gels. And by the way, no affiliation here. If you look on the packet, you'll see there's 25 grams of carbs in their gel 100. So you need to consume 2 of those per hour to hit that 50 grams of carbs per hour threshold. And it is really that simple. Look at what product you want to use. Work out how much of that product you need to consume, and you've done most of the work. So now you know how much to eat during a marathon, you should know what to eat during a marathon too. My honest advice here, and again, I'm just trying to keep it simple, is to use gels. They're generally very well tolerated, they're easy to carry on you in pockets or running belts, and they'll help you to reach your carb goals much easier than anything else. And there are so many different brands out there, which is great because you can try different ones, practice in training and see what you prefer. My main recommendation for this section is that you pick a gel that contains a dual source carbohydrate, which means it contains glucose and fructose. Now you might see glucose called maltodextrin or dextrose, and these are essentially the same, so that's fine. When you consume a combination of glucose and fructose, it means 2 things. You can absorb more carbohydrates, which is beneficial for performance. You decrease the risk of tummy troubles like bloating or diarrhea. So if your gel contains both of these 2 sugars and you can hit that minimum 50 grams of carbs per hour mark, then you are golden. Now, some of you might be thinking, but James, I don't like gels. They're gross. And if that's you, then fair enough. I'm going to come back to this section when we talk about alternatives, but first, let's talk about when you should start consuming nutrition during your marathon and how frequently. Loads of runners I've spoken to in the past made a significant mistake when it comes to their nutrition during a marathon. Remember earlier I mentioned that carbohydrates should be your focus and that you only have a limited store of them. Well, this is super important. As you run your marathon, your carbohydrate stores or glycogen stores are going to decrease at a rate that's quicker than you can replace them. And this might give you some idea of when you should start consuming nutrition during a marathon. Basically, you want to keep your glycogen stores up so that they don't dip below the critical threshold. Because if they do go below that, then you'll start to feel the effects of hitting the wall or bonking. Mean you'll have to slow down and you will feel absolutely awful. Now, before I go through the exact timings, I just want to say thank you to those of you who support my channel as a paying subscriber. I really appreciate this, and it helps me to create the best videos I can for you. So yeah, thank you. If you would like to join these amazing people, then please head over to my page and consider becoming a subscriber, as it would mean a heck of a lot to me. If you do, you are awesome. If you don't, you're still awesome, and I hope you get lots of value from my videos. Now, when it comes to when to start consuming nutrition in a marathon, my usual recommendation is to start taking nutrition once you've settled into your stride, which for most people is about 15 to 20 minutes. This gives you enough time to just get into your rhythm and feel good, and then you can start focusing on your nutrition. Depending on your strategy, a normal approach would then be to take another gel roughly every 30 to 40 minutes so that you're hitting that minimum 50 grams of carbs per hour mark. If you're using a gel that has more carbohydrates, so for example SIS's Beta Fuels, Morton's Gel 160 or OTE's Super Gels, then you might need to consume them less frequently because these gels contain 40 grams of carbs each. Using these big gels can actually be a big plus because it means you have to carry less on you. So it's often a bit easier on race day because you aren't spending as much time faffing around opening gels as you run. There's a golden rule when it comes to race day. Never try anything new. This absolutely goes for running a marathon and your nutrition. Unless there's no alternative, you should always practice your nutrition in advance to check that you tolerate it okay, that you're happy opening the packets and eating the gels while running. Because real talk here, some gels are super fiddly to open and mean I wouldn't actually want to use them while racing. My standard advice is to start practicing at least 6 weeks out from your race and follow these 3 principles. You use the specific products that you're planning to on race day. You consume as much as you're expecting to on race day. And you include some race pace intervals to mimic the stress on your body. These are all crucial if you want to avoid any unpleasant tummy troubles on the day, and I can't stress how important this is. I've had clients who have had previous bad experiences because they didn't practice their nutrition during longer, harder runs. And this meant their body wasn't under the same load as during their actual marathon. When you work harder, you can't absorb as much nutrition, so it's left just sitting in your gut and your body doesn't enjoy that. And then you can get the whole host of nasty symptoms like bloating, stitches, or even the dreaded runner's diarrhea. So practice in advance, try gradually consuming more carbohydrates per hour, and make sure you've refined your nutrition strategy well in advance of your race. Now, I mentioned about carb loading, and I also mentioned that there are alternative options for you if you don't want to use gels, and that is definitely true. You can try drinks, tube locks, and some other interesting nutrition products. And I've created a whole video on this, as well as carb loading, which you can watch by clicking either of these 2 here.